Hello guys. What if the man you trust most is the weapon your enemy aims at your heart? The game is afoot, but this time, the board is London's soul and every piece is stained with blood. The silence in Sir Alistair Finch's study was heavier than the damask curtains that swallowed the morning light. It was a thick, syrupy silence broken only by the drip of something dark and viscous soaking into the fibers of a Persian rug. Sherlock Holmes stood over the body, not with a lens but with a gaze that dissected the scene layer by layer. Finch, the Queen's own physician, was sprawled in his wingback chair, his skin the color of bleached parchment, his eyes wide with a terror that death had failed to erase. There was no wound, no sign of struggle, just a void where life and every drop of blood used to be. The room was locked from the inside. The windows barred. Scotland Yard saw an impossible suicide. Holmes saw a declaration. This was not a murder. It was a harvest. He adjusted his collar, the scent of iron and ozone clinging to the air, a scent he was beginning to recognize. This was the fourth prominent figure in the city found as a bloodless husk, a vessel emptied by a ghost. A pattern was not emerging, it was screaming, and as he looked at the two small, almost imperceptible marks on Finch's neck, hidden beneath his starched collar, Holmes felt the cold certainty of a predator recognizing another's work. A war had come to London, not with cannons and flags, but in whispers, in the dark, and it was already inside the city's most fortified walls. The investigation became a descent. Holmes moved through London's arteries, not the grimy alleys of his usual hunts, but the gilded veins of power that pulsed from Whitehall to the private clubs of Pall Mall. The victims were not random. A shipping magnate controlling the empire's trade routes. A minister of war privy to every troop movement. A financier with his hands on the national debt. And now, the Queen's physician. They were pillars, and something was methodically pulling them down, leaving behind a fine, red dust of political chaos. His inquiries were met with a new kind of resistance, a wall of polite, impenetrable smiles from men whose families had run England for centuries. They knew. Their fear was a palpable thing, masked by arrogance. He found the first thread in a forgotten archive, a footnote in a 16th century parliamentary record detailing the execution of a nobleman, Lord Harrington, for unholy appetites and unnatural longevities. The name surfaced again in the Crimean War, a cavalry officer of impossible bravery. Then again on the board of the East India Company. It was a lineage of ghosts, a name that should have been dust but was still signing papers, influencing policy, and, Holmes suspected, feeding. The Crimson Covenant. The name was a whisper in a madman's diary, a symbol carved into the back of a victim's watch. It wasn't a gang. It was a shadow government, an ancient organism embedded in the empire's flesh, steering it, nurturing it for its own eternal sustenance. They were not monsters hiding in crypts. They were the architects. Lord Harrington, when Holmes finally engineered a meeting, was nothing like the fiend he'd imagined. He was elegance and control personified, his face a mask of aristocratic calm, his eyes holding the weary weight of centuries. They met in the heart of the British Museum, surrounded by the plundered glories of dead empires. "You see artifacts, Mr. Holmes?" Harrington said, his voice a low, cultured murmur that cut through the gallery's hush. "I see lessons in survival. Your empire is a magnificent beast, strong, voracious, dominant. We simply ensure it has the right shepherds. We prune the weak branches. We cauterize the infections. The men you mourn, they were threats. One advocated for peace, a retreat from our global destiny. Another was mismanaging funds, weakening our economic heart. They were cancers. We are the cure." There was no monstrous ego, no insane ranting. There was only a chilling, absolute conviction. There was only a chilling, absolute conviction. His ideology was a fortress. He spoke of the Covenant's origins, of a bloodline cursed and gifted in the Crusades, of their pain watching humanity's self-destructive cycles. They did not create the game of empires, he argued. They had simply mastered it. "We are the immune system the world needs," he concluded, his gaze sweeping over the relics. "And you, detective, are an anomaly we can no longer tolerate." The threat was clear, but the true attack had already landed. It started subtly with Watson. A complaint of battlefield nightmares, more vivid than ever before. An uncharacteristic sharpness in his senses, noticing the scent of rain before the clouds gathered. He grew pale, his robust energy replaced by a coiled, restless stillness. Holmes watched, his mind a storm of horrified calculus. The wound. That festering Giselle bullet wound from Maiwand he'd always complained of. It wasn't just a scar, it was a doorway. He researched the regimental histories from that campaign, cross-referencing field hospital records with lists of the dead. He found it, a report of a strange, dark-clad field surgeon who moved among the dying during the battle's chaotic aftermath, a man who performed miracles, saving soldiers no one thought could be saved, a man who matched the description of a younger Lord Harrington. They hadn't turned Watson then. They had planted a seed. A dormant strain in his blood, waiting for a signal, a trigger. Now, as Holmes closed in on them, they were activating their sleeper agent. The realization was a shard of ice in his gut. Every conversation, every shared meal, every moment of trust was now suspect. Was Watson's steady hand, the one that held a scalpel or a revolver with equal calm, still his own? The psychological warfare was relentless. Harrington didn't send thugs, he sent doubts. He arranged for Watson to be celebrated for a miraculous diagnosis at the hospital, a feat of intuition that even Watson couldn't explain. He left clues for Holmes that only Watson, with his military knowledge, could decipher, forcing Holmes to rely on the very man who might be his undoing. The bond between them, the one constant in Holmes's clockwork world, was being weaponized. He is becoming what he was always meant to be, Harrington's. Message read, delivered with a single perfect crimson rose. More than human. Do you seek to cure him or to cage him? The dilemma was a vice. To expose Watson would be to sign his death warrant. To hide him would be to let the Covenant's tendrils wrap around the last bastion of his life. He saw the conflict in Watson's own eyes. The confusion, the shame at his own strange new appetites, the fear of a darkness he didn't understand growing within him. He stopped eating. He spent hours staring into the fire, his hands subconsciously straying to the old wound. Hope was a fool's luxury. Kindness was a liability. Holmes had only his mind, and it was telling him that to win this war, he would have to perform a vivisection on his own soul. He had to betray his only friend to save him. He prepared a syringe not with a cure, but with a compound of his own design. A poison so potent it would destroy the vampiric cells, but so traumatic it would shatter the host's mind, burning away memories, identity, everything. It was a choice between a monster and a ghost. The climax arrived not in a clash of steel, but in the suffocating quiet of 221B Baker Street. The fire was low, casting long, dancing shadows. Harrington was there, having walked past Mrs. Hudson as if he were an old family friend. He wasn't there to fight. He was there to collect his asset. "It is time, Doctor," he said softly, his eyes on Watson. Watson stood rigid, his face pale, his knuckles white. He was fighting it, a war waging behind his eyes. "He is not your pawn," Holmes stated, his voice dangerously level. He held the syringe behind his back. "He was never a pawn," Harrington countered, his logic as sharp and cold as a scalpel. "He is the next step, an evolution. You offer him a return to frailty, to decay. I offer him eternity and purpose. You see a monster. I see a guardian for the future. You are too sentimental to secure. You cling to a flawed, fleeting humanity. We shed it for something greater." He took a step closer to Watson. "Join us, John. Leave this museum of broken things behind." Watson let out a choked cry, his body trembling. He looked at Holmes, his eyes pleading, lost. And in that moment, Holmes saw the path. Not his own, Watson's. The choice had to belong to the man, not the disease. He let his hand with the syringe fall to his side. "The choice is yours, Watson," Holmes said, his voice raw. It was the greatest gamble of his life. He was surrendering his queen to see the board. Watson stared at his own hands, then at Harrington, then back at Holmes. The trust, the years of shared danger and quiet companionship, flickered in his gaze. Then his face hardened with a soldier's resolve. He turned not to Holmes, nor to Harrington. He turned towards the fireplace and plunged his hand into the roaring flames. The scream was inhuman, a sound of agony and defiance. The smell of burning flesh filled the room. Harrington watched, his ageless face showing the first crack of surprise, of miscalculation. Watson pulled his charred hand back, his eyes blazing with a pain that was entirely, terribly human. "I am a British soldier," he hissed through clenched teeth. "And a doctor. I took an oath to do no harm." The spell was not broken by a chemical compound or a clever strategy. It was shattered by an act of pure, self-destructive will, by a man choosing agonizing mortality over a painless, monstrous eternity. Harrington stared, not at Watson, but at Holmes. He hadn't lost to a clever detective, he had lost to a bond he could never comprehend, a variable his logic could not account for. Without another word, he turned and vanished into the London night, a shadow retreating but not defeated. Holmes rushed to Watson, who had collapsed, cradling his ruined hand, his body racked with tremors. The infection was purged, seared away by fire and will. But the cost was etched into his flesh, a permanent reminder of the abyss he had stared into. The victory was silent, smelling of burnt skin and shattered nerves. London was safe, for now. The Covenant was wounded, not destroyed. And Holmes was left with his friend, a man scarred to his very soul, knowing he had won, but having lost the simple, uncomplicated piece of their world forever. The victory cost a pound of flesh, literally. It reminds us that the deepest loyalties are not proven by love, but by the sacrifices we are willing to endure in the fire. If this story held you captive, like, share, and subscribe for more tales from the Edge.